the tendency in spiritual circles is to try and eliminate the ego, try to get rid of it, as if it's something bad or wrong. But we should understand that the ego is a functional structure that helps us navigate the world. It allows us to communicate with each other, to use language. It allows us to remember our name. It allows us to cross the street safely. This functional aspect of the human being is not a problem. The problem arises when we identify with that, when we take ourselves exclusively for the body-mind, the personality, the history, and for that to remain as an unquestioned assumption. From that unquestioned identity arises fear, arises defensiveness, arises comparison, arises pride, and arises shame. When we feel criticized, when we feel rejected, when we feel hurt in some way, then there's a contraction. We experience a contraction of the self or a contraction in the body. When we are praised, when we are elevated, when we are given some kind of recognition, then we may feel expanded, inflated, and so on. Contraction and expansion are activities of the ego. In this sense, the ego is not an entity as such. It is the activity. We identify with that activity, and that is the error. If we really examine or come closer to what is really happening in this ego activity, we may notice that all of it is a movement of energy. In the activity of contraction and expansion, what's really happening, what we're really experiencing are sensations. Sensations in the body, the movement of energy, emotional energies, thought energy, thought movement, the movement of thought. All of these are movements. All of these are appearances in awareness. So rather than trying to get rid of this fictional entity called ego, we are invited to simply observe, notice, and feel all movements. That's direct experience. In that sense, we don't apply a narrative to it. Without applying a narrative to it, then we don't create an identity out of it. So whatever arises, whether we call it retraction, contraction, tightness, openness, whatever we call it, sorrow, and so on, to allow that, to bring a soft gaze to it, which is compassionate awareness. We allow all movements, all patterns to be seen without condemning them, without rejecting them. This is very different to trying to get rid of ego or trying to rise above ego. What happens is that there is space around that which appears. Whatever we name it as, however we describe it, however we feel it, there is space. And that space is the light of awareness. And that light illuminates our experience. In other words, it starts to become more transparent. It starts to become lighter. The reason that the ego, the seeming ego identity gets triggered or reactive or holds on to trauma or any form of resistance or tightness or opposition is because there is no space around that pattern, around that energy. So it remains suppressed. It remains locked in. That's when we say it's stuck in my body or stored in my body or in the nervous system. It's simply been over time. That pattern has been repeated, that activity has been repeated, but it hasn't had any space around it. So it's just got locked in. It's become dense. The resolution is not to fix ourselves in the conventional sense. It's not to get rid of it. It's to bring space to it. It's to bring the light of awareness to it, which is simply to allow it to rise to the surface. That's why when we experience a glimpse of opening, a glimpse of awakening, a glimpse of freedom, even the simplicity of being, that which has been hidden, that which has been suppressed, may come to the surface to be seen. Not to be seen as another thing to condemn in ourselves, not something to attempt to make a better self out of, a more healed self, a more whole self, a more spiritual self, but to allow the space of awareness, the light of awareness, the soft gaze to dissolve the density of that contraction or that pattern or that activity. In this way, we're not getting rid of ego. We're illuminating. Awareness is illuminating ego's activity, which lightens the whole pattern, if you like, of that activity. It lightens it so that it softens resistance, it softens grasping, it softens control. Movements may still happen, energetic movements, emotional movements, thought movements may still continue, may still arise, but they don't have the same density or velocity. Reactiveness doesn't happen. Trigger points don't happen. And if they do, they're less likely to leave a trace. So they don't get locked into what we, experiences in the body, in the nervous system, which then becomes tension or heaviness. So there was a question yesterday about how do we anchor ourselves more deeply in the simplicity of being, or the recognition of being, the recognition of awareness. How we could say that this is how, if you like, by not by trying to find and stay in open awareness, but by seeing, noticing those movements, those activities, those energies without any condemnation, simply allowing, the soft gaze upon what is in your direct experience, allows all shadows, all stuckness, all density to be revealed and released, because everything wants to come home in the light when it's given space.